municipalities link to the state government comes in the form of the Office of Policy and Management, or OPM. The OPM umbrella is large, but they cover many areas of primary concern for municipalities, including administering grants. Our guest today is Martin Heft, the Undersecretary of OPM. He serves as a liaison to organizations like CCM, but he also has first-hand experience in the municipal arena as First Selectman of Chester and former CCM board member. Also joining us today is Brian O'Connor, CCM's Director of Public Policy. We'd like to thank our sponsors at Gateway and Housatonic Community Colleges. The Municipal Voice is a Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or our member municipal leaders.
Morning. Thank you.
Also joining us today, we have Brian from our advocacy team. Thanks for being here.
Hey, no problem. Thank you.
So I think for our listeners at home who may not be as familiar as me and Brian are with some of this stuff, could you just give a brief overview of what OPM is and what its role is in the state government?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you. OPM functions basically as the governor's staff agency and plays a central role in state government. We provide the information, we analyze and formulate public policy, for the state. Mm-hmm. Also work with all of our state agencies as well as the municipalities in implementing those policy decisions on the governor's behalf.
Excellent. So as one of the main liaison to CCM from OPM, one of the ways we've worked a lot lately with the state, obviously, is on policy in kind of regards to COVID. And with COVID, everything's kind of gotten sidetracked, and CCM has been working with the governor and the state, providing guidance on many of these executive orders. From your point of view, how has CCM's guidance helped with ease transition into the so-called kind of new normal, the way we're doing things?
Yeah, and it is really interesting because they're looking at a whole different way of handling the way the state government's operating, how municipal governments have to operate now. As you mentioned, having been, local government myself for 20 years and being on board of CCM for all of those years, I know the wealth and knowledge, the resources that CCM has. Their partnership, with the governor's office, with OPM, as we've been, drafting executive orders, reviewing them, looking at what are the top municipal issues to keep those critical functions open and operating on the municipal level side. They've been very helpful, very welcomed, and the input's been great. Just the resources that CCM has and the knowledge and the staff, have all been terrific and a great help to us.
Excellent. That's great. Brian, how has your staff been involved in all this stuff?
A lot of it, Joe DeLong has been meeting and actually we've been collaborating with some of our partners, the Connecticut COGS and also COST, as far as providing input. And I think where we've been effective as a policy team is actually answering a lot of the questions after the executive orders have been disseminated to the public and established. I think we've been able to kind of, take some of the work that Martin has done and our executive director, Joe DeLong, and put it into practice, so to speak, and answer some of the questions that many of our first selectmen and mayors have.
I know one area of concern for a lot of our municipalities is the CARES Act. Our director, Joe DeLong, as just mentioned, put a letter to the governor saying, we urge you to provide meaningful state CARES funding to cities and towns. And one of the issues there is that none of the cities in Connecticut meet the $500,000 federal grant sharing threshold, the mandated threshold. So can you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. OPM's budget division's following every available grant funding program out there at, federal level, the CARES Act, along with, a number of other programs out there, basically looking at everything that's going to be available to help our municipalities. And the goal is to try to get 100% of everything reimbursed somehow through all of the different, programs, whether it be through FEMA, whether it be through the CARES Act. So a lot of the funding is going to be, flowing directly from the federal government to municipalities, while some other funding is going to come directly to the state. And the state's going to be able to have the opportunity to put that down to the municipal level and to disseminate that. The Secretary of OPM, actually, we're finishing drafting now, letter going out to all the municipalities talking about what the different funding levels are, the programs that are there. The CARES Act is in there as well, because there's multiple pieces of the CARES Act, not just this one piece of with the 500,000 population threshold. There are other pieces in there. Basically outlining the aid, the letter will show, and requesting, estimates on their expenses to be able to help us, enable us to calculate how we're going to disseminate, municipal aid, for these programs.
What are some of the other aspects you were just mentioning of the act that would be of concern to towns?
Give me one moment, because I have it here. It's one of those things don't remember right off the top of my head.
Hey, as long as you got the notes, right?
There's a number of different programs. There's, part dealing with education, Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. There's an elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund, K through 12.
Okay.
For that, housing and urban development, community development block grants, small city grants, housing opportunities. Justice Department is going to be having a program that's going to run through their Justice Assistance Grant program. And I also know, like, Connecticut Department of Public Health is receiving funds for reimbursements to local health districts. Just, a few of those that are out there of just some of the programs.
A lot of moving parts to that.
Yes, there's a lot of moving parts, and, and as we know, federal government still is looking at other, funding opportunities and funding ways to fund the municipalities and the state governments.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I know one area that many of our mayors and first selectmen are looking for reimbursement, and hopefully it's through the housing and or maybe even some of the CBDG grants, is sheltering, or some of the work that they've been doing with the homeless population and other vulnerable populations. I know that's a big concern for many of, because there's been a large outlay of money in many areas.
So I don't think we have enough time on the show today to go into everything that your office does, but I think there are a few things that do deserve some detail. The Assessment, Data Collection, and Grants Management Unit covers the payment in lieu of taxes, aka pilot, the purpose of which is to offset the amount of revenue a municipality or city would have collected from taxes from colleges, hospitals, and other state buildings, other tax-exempt things. Can you tell us a little bit about that formula and how it's applied?
Sure. Although we don't have enough time on this program to go through the full formula, one of the things of when I came on board with OPM a couple of years ago, one of the things I had to do was learn all the formulas. Fortunately, because the state's been using payment lists, my predecessor didn't have to calculate the formula, so I actually had to go back, recreate the formulas and everything on there. But in a basic nutshell, the formula is, by statutes, provide 45% reimbursement for state-owned, 77% college and hospital, and there's exceptions in there for different, properties. Yeah. The formula itself includes, the assessments of those properties, the mill rates, for that, as well as a tiering component there where, based on highest percentage of taxable property in certain, in certain mill rate caveats, there's a tiering of a 1, 2, and 3 for how it's all put out. So there's a number of mechanisms that get put into the formula. Obviously, if it's not fully funded, all the payments are prorated based upon, what funding is available.
Speaking about, you said it's not fully funded. According to some numbers we've got, it's underfunded by about $350 million based on our figures. Are there any attempts going on right now to bring that level of funding up?
Well, for a number of years now, as most municipal leaders know and CCM know, that it's been by payment list. Yeah. So they haven't even used the formulas for calculating out the grants. Some point, most of the time, the payment lists are just part of the budget. At some times, the governor's office has been involved with the budget process with the legislature. Other times, they have not been. Sometimes we can't find out where those numbers came from, for how they were calculated out there based upon, numbers. Some municipalities get more than what the formula was supposed to calculate, and others get less. So it's kind of, interesting topic.
Yeah.
For that. And that not only goes for pilot, but other programs too that they've done payment lists for. I can tell you that for fiscal year 2021, the governor, budget and that was approved. They kept the same level at the fiscal year 19, which were payment lists. My division did provide the grant calculations for what they would be if it was going to be fully funded and everything. But then it all becomes, after that part from when my division, hands it off, if you will, those calculation, it becomes part of the budget negotiation process. And, that sometimes is behind closed doors, sometimes it's out on the floor of the legislature. So it's, some of it's kind of up in the air and, on that. So it's kind of out of, goes to a different level, for that beyond my.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about pilot a lot. It's a big concern for towns, and every time we have someone on, state senators, reps, CEOs, whoever, we've always posed the questions: should municipalities be granted the power to raise funds in alternative ways, or would it be better to simply fund pilot fully?
Yeah, I think talking to the municipal leaders and having been a municipal leader. I think, I consistently hear all the time, whether it be going to a CCM meeting or other municipal functions, is that the best property tax relief that can be provided to municipalities to fully fund the pilot programs.
Yeah.
I hear it consistently, on it. I mean, we're fortunate Connecticut has this program. Our neighboring state of Massachusetts doesn't have this program. They don't, municipalities don't get reimbursed for, exempt properties, everything. Connecticut's one of the few states, that do. On that. So, and as I mentioned, the administration has kept the levels at least equal to 19, protected municipal aid. That was one thing that, was important for this administration, not to reduce any of the municipal aid, at least keep it level, which they've done. I think most municipalities, would love to see it raised. As I said, that goes back to that whole budget negotiation process.
Yeah. Brian, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was going to say, fully funding pilot has always been a key issue for our membership, as you know, Martin. And I think actually going out into the next fiscal year, I know this fiscal year, the governor has made a commitment to fund the grants. He's actually released some of the grants early, which has been very helpful to our membership. But I think there's a large concern, with the COVID-19 pandemic, of what the future looks like. What is the fiscal year 21 going to bring us? And I know we have a healthy budget reserve balance, but I think municipalities are going to, hopefully maintain the fiscal line and, as I say, fully fund pilot and some of the other grants.
Yeah.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH LP 103.5 FM.
Pilot is one aspect, and in cities like New Haven, Hartford, where 50% of property is not in the grant list, it has forced them to kind of drastically raise their property taxes. But OPM offers property tax relief programs, such as the Distressed Municipality Reimbursement Program. Can you talk a little bit about that program?
Sure. The distressed municipalities get defined by the Department of Economic Community Development. It's based upon their fiscal capacity, which includes their tax base, residential personal income, and the need of public service. Once that list is developed, then those municipalities are eligible for the distressed municipality, property tax relief program that's offered, which then they can get reimburses up to 50% of the revenue loss for the qualified claims. My division actually, when the assessors turn in those claims to us, we audit them and everything, make sure they're all compatible with their certifications forms. We work closely with DECD on that to provide them that, relief. I mean, typically it's been about $7 million is what's in the budget for the distressed municipalities that they receive back, for, that aid.
And is it only monetary relief, or are there some other longer term goals with the program?
The program we operate is just monetary.
Okay.
It's a monetary relief. And I will note that in the this year's budget bond package that it was put in there that the reimbursement that goes back to the municipalities have to be used for capital expenditures on that. So they did put a caveat into the bonding bill for their reimbursement funds coming back, that it will have a specific use for that to, help with, the reinvestment.
Excellent. One new program is the COVID-19 Municipal Tax Relief Form. Can you tell us what went into the thinking on that program?
Sure. Having far less impact than our similar situation in 2019 with the federal shutdown. The administration, knew how difficult it was going to be for both residential, commercial property owners to meet tax collection deadlines.
Yeah.
We actually had municipalities reach out to, OPM, some through CCM, some through, sister, cost. For that, looking at ways, that they can relieve, for those struggling taxpayers. We had recommendations, for, what can landlords do, what can commercial do, different programs on that. So that's where, it really stemmed from was, looking at, what had happened with the federal, shutdown and how it impacted mainly, more probably like Groton, New London area where there's more federal employees on that. And we did talk with them to see how their programs, operated, were there issues, everything else, use some of that knowledge in order to start working on this program, and allowing, the municipalities to choose one or two of the programs, or they could choose both, of those, programs.
Yeah. You mentioned New London and some other towns. Were there any programs that stick out to you as particularly interesting sort of ideas?
No, well, the programs that both New London and Groton did were the federal shutdown program that, we had put in. They didn't come up with their own program. All right. For that, but it was, the tax deferral as long as they were laid off or out of work from the federal shutdown.
So building on the experience from that time.
Correct. So that experience, the form that was used there was modified to be used for this, application.
And I was going to say, I think that's why it's critical, as we, get into July in the next fiscal year, that the money from the state that people rely on, or the towns, I should say, municipalities rely on, is so important, because there may be some cash flow issues for some of our municipalities, especially if they implement the tax deferment program. So, to the extent that, the state can maintain its commitment to, funding the grants in a timely manner, that'd be helpful. And this is kind of a double-edged sword where the municipalities are looking for support, and they're also looking to support their, as you said, the individual taxpayer, residential taxpayer, and municipal business taxpayer as well.
Yeah. So I know this was put together pretty quickly. Are municipalities mandated to participate in the program?
Yes, Governor's Executive Order 7S and modified by Executive Order 7W does require a municipality and quasi-municipalities. Quasi is looking at your special taxing districts, regional water authorities, those type of items or agencies, to either pick the deferral program or the low interest rate program, or a municipality can choose to offer both, but they have to choose one or the other at a minimum for that. We're fortunate, those programs, as I, mentioned earlier, we use some of the federal shutdown, pieces on that, but as we drafted up the, executive order language, as we drafted the forms, as we drafted the guidance, we had, the Assessors Association, the Tax Collectors Association, CCM, cost, municipal attorneys, and officials, all on, little subcommittees, if you will, helping to put this together, for that. So without, everyone's, teamwork on this, it, couldn't have been done so quickly.
Yeah, I have to tell you, with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's amazing that you get all those groups together so quickly to get them to agree on something. Yeah. That doesn't happen during a regular legislative session.
Is this all it took to get everyone to work together? So that's one thing that's mandated, and mandates are always a big issue for us at CCM. There's a lot of mandates on towns and cities. Your department is directly responsible for the Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations, or ACIR, which released a mandates compendium in February. There are 1,400 of them. Can you tell us what ACIR's role is in assessing mandates?
Sure. Well, so OPM, as you mentioned, OPM, we have a staff member of my team that staffs ACIR, and I sit on the ACIR on behalf of the secretary for her position. by statute, ACR has to, provide the listing of all the mandates, imposed.
Mhm.
In the past, ACR has not assessed the individual mandates on that. That's one of the things, last legislative session, ACIR was, if you will, reconstituted, added some more members to it
Mhm.
from different areas, labor, education, some different pieces there. One of the things that looking at in a couple of reports and discussions is the goal moving forward is to take, half dozen of those and analyze them and
Mhm.
start really looking at what is the official impact of this. I mean, sometimes
Mhm.
we get the impact, statements from OFA, General Assembly, as the bill's going
Yeah.
through, but sometimes that's not always what the true impact is on a municipality. I mean, with 169 municipalities, that impact could be different, all of those, depending upon what the staffing levels are and everything else. Some may require more work, some may not,
Mhm.
for that. So one of the goals now is with the reconstituted ACIR and the membership there is to start pulling, a half dozen or a dozen of them, and start looking at it, analyzing and saying, okay, is the impact here, that's been analyzed, is it accurate,
Yeah.
for that and moving forward. So that is one of the goals to continue to do.
So ACIR, it sounds like it's been around for a while, but it kind of waned a little bit. But the new administration has been trying to bring it back and give it a little bit more oomph.
Yes, yeah, I think ACR has always been there, but it's been more, do the statutory reports. It was, over time, we've had, different commission, different things, all
Mhm.
looking at regional services and everything. Last year's with the budget adoption, Public Act 117, one of the sections in there had ACR work with finance, revenue, bonding, and planning development, looking at shared services and doing a whole report, which has been, given back to the legislature. But unfortunately, as they're not in right now, it's kind of, sitting there with a number of recommendations looking at, how can municipalities do shared services better and everything else. One of the things that came up was, the mandates of looking at these and doing analysis of them.
I know one part that stuck out to us in that compendium was state aid to municipalities is a significant portion of state budget, but each additional mandate further constrains the municipality's ability to fund services that its residents expect for their tax dollars. The heavy reliance on property taxes, in tandem with the uneven spread of property wealth and tax-exempt property among the municipalities, increases the challenge many face in taking on new statutory or regulatory requirements. What does that mean to you?
I think it's going through is that Connecticut is, I think we're second highest reliance on property taxes for there. And there are so many mandates, some are minor, some are heavy impact, and so that scope changes so much. You can also say some are good and some are bad.
Yeah, they're not all bad, but there's so many. How did we get to 1,400?
I think this is over time, it's just, as something, and I think, to clarify, that 1,400 mandates necessarily are not all, have a cost to them. Something simple, I think even the report says like an election one, it just saying that the reporting has to be done by a certain time. Well, it's a mandate that has to be done, but after election reports have to be in by a certain day, it's not necessarily a cost item on there, but it is a mandate. So when you look at those mandates, everything, when, most, the state of Connecticut's a home rule, on this, but there has to be, guidance for the 169s to do the things the same way, on it that way. I mean, I think there should be a review of, all the different mandates that are out there.
How do we separate out the good ones from the bad ones, kind of try to reduce the number? Yeah.
Right. And I think it's looking at all of those and saying, okay, what is, basically going back and start analyzing what is the purpose of the mandate? Is it still serving its purpose? And, or does it need to be changed or updated, or should it be, removed? Of course, and Brian will know from being legislature as well that, to get a statute repealed is a lot harder than getting it adopted.
Adopted, exactly. And I was going to say, I think, some of them are just, trying to modernize some of them where, we've moved in, even now with technology is moving forward, getting, using less paper. and having to do things in like triplicate, just different things like that. And actually brings to mind like the municipal spending cap. I know that is something that, if we could ever streamline that, obviously we, to a form that we already produce and disseminate to OPM, that would be very helpful.
That would make you happy.
That would make me happy. It would make our members happy.
Yes. More important.
Particularly our finance directors.
Yeah. So with coronavirus, conversations on this show have varied. CEO saying the work must go on. We had the president of the Yale College Council saying that COVID-19 has paused their work in the community. Where does OPM stand? What does the immediate future of your division look like?
I'll tell you, well, one of the goals, I think, with all the governor's executive orders, the things that we're looking at, at least my division with OPM, is making sure that, keeping, critical state municipal operations open and running. Mm-hmm. As we look through, I went through my staff, the other day looking at, what deadlines are coming up through July 1st. It's like, okay, can these still operate? Does it require an in-person requirement mm-hmm. versus someone that can do something over the phone, electronically, email, or by mail for that? So I think, all the executives orders are aimed at doing that and, as well as protecting the public. I think that's the main, piece of this as we're moving forward is looking at that, as I mentioned, the executive orders coming out are making sure that, the state government can operate, the municipal operations, can still operate. And then, they've got to look at, and it all is, based upon that public safety is when is mm-hmm. it safe to reopen certain businesses and what level and everything else for it that way.
Yeah. Brian, do you have any thoughts regarding this stuff?
I think, some of the lessons learned, through this process, I think what I foresee is some of these practices may actually be implemented, down the line through legislation as best practices. And I think that's mm-hmm. some of the stuff that's evolving, both in our conversations with OPM, the governor's office, and in our membership.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank both of you for being on the show today. Thanks to Martin Heft from OPM, Brian O'Connor from CCM. Thanks to our sponsors at Gateway Community College and Housatonic Community College. Learn more about them at gatewayct.edu and housatonic.edu. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer, Christopher Gilson is our producer, Harry Draws on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like, and watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page. What is the 2020 census? Every 10 years, the census records everyone living in this country. It's written in the Constitution. And it comes in a questionnaire that counts everyone who lives at your address on April 1st. The data can be used to inform funding for services like fire stations, schools, clinics, and representation that affect your community. How will the 2020 census data be used? Where there are more people, there are more needs for public services. That's why the census is used by the government to inform funding decisions each year. But that's not all. It's also used by nonprofits to inform services, by businesses to create jobs, and even by students for school projects. Understanding how the population changes helps us shape the communities across Connecticut for the better. How does the 2020 census affect representation? There are 435 seats in the House of Representatives. These get distributed to the 50 states by population, and Connecticut currently has 5 seats. States with smaller populations get at least 1, while states with larger populations might get more. How do I take the 2020 census? In March 2020, every address in Connecticut will receive an invitation to complete a simple questionnaire. And there are 3 ways to respond. Number 1, do it online. Number 2, call by phone. Number 3, send it by mail. For those who don't respond, a census taker from your community will follow up and assist you. Is my 2020 census data safe? After sending your census response, your personal data is kept safe.
By law, it can't be shared with any other government agency, law enforcement, or landlord. So take your 2020 census with peace of mind and help shape the future of Connecticut. Learn more at 2020census.gov.